How many of you have ever wanted to make perfect pintucks? Well, the Pintuck Foot is another one of those feet that seem to be a little bit scary, but when you actually learn to use it, you'll find it to be more than worth your time. Here's an example of a block that I made where I put pintucks in. I actually put pintucks on a piece of fabric, and then I used that fabric as applique fabric to put it into the middle of this little flower. Alright, so let's talk about how to use the Pintuck Foot. Well, I have laid out here 2 different Pintuck feet and some Pintuck blades. This is a 5-groove Pintuck Foot. This is the one I like to use, and what happens with this foot, if you flip over and look at the back, is that there are 5 grooves. And what's going to happen is you're going to sew your first row of pintuck, and then you're going to go back over it, but the second pass you're going to put, in order to make your pintucks perfectly even, your first pintuck will ride along in the groove of the foot, and then you'll go to make your third row of pintucks, and they'll ride along in the groove of your foot, and that keeps the pintucks exactly parallel with one another. This foot is also a Pintuck Foot, but it has a decorative guide, and it would be used if you wanted your pintucks further apart, because there's a groove, and then here's a groove, and then here's where you would be sewing. So this 5-groove foot would certainly make your pintucks much closer than this foot. Now, the next thing that you'll need to use a Pintuck Foot is a double needle. And just a mention of double needles is enough to scare some people away, but they're really not scary or intimidating. I've laid out here the various twin needles that I have. Twin needles come in about 2, 4, 6, 7 different widths. If you notice here, this, for example, this needle is 1.6 and then /70. The 1.6 is the distance between the 2 needles, and the 70 is the size. So 1.6 would be a very narrow gap between the needles, and a 70 needle would be a really small needle. And then here is a 2.0, a 2.5, a 3, a 4, a 6, and an 8. And those are, to my knowledge, all the widths that the needles come in. And then, now here's a 2.0 80, 2.5 80, a 3.0 90, and you know a 90 needle would be bigger than an 80, and of course 80 bigger than a 70. And then the 60, the 6 and the 8 that I have are both 100, and just as comparison, there's. Now for your pintucks, you'll probably want to choose somewhere between a 3, 3.5, or 4. And so I've taken the 4, and I've already loaded it onto my machine. Now you could make your pintucks with just a Pintuck Foot and a twin needle, but if you really want to have a nice consistent pintuck, then you might also want to get a set of Pintuck blades. Now these 2 blades come as a set in the FOF machine, and what you have is a little blade that we're gonna pop into our machine in a minute, and those feet, those twin needles, well, I could get the one back out here, are going to ride along on top of this and stitch with this blade between the needles. This blade is higher than the first blade. So if you want a higher Pintuck, one with more height to it, then you would use this blade with that is whatever sticks up higher than this blade. I think if you use the higher blade, you want to be sure that probably you go to a little bit wider needle. Maybe instead of a 3.5, use a 4. Okay, so now I'm gonna go over to the machine. I've already got the twin needle on my machine, so we'll go over there and we'll see how to load the twin needle and how to put on the foot and the blades and then use them. Okay, so to use twin needles, you're going to need 2 spools of thread. So I've got a yellow here and a white, and you'll just go through and load just like you would if you were stitching with one needle, except your auto threader ain't going to work, so you'll have to do it the old-fashioned way. Okay, so I've got the yellow loaded through this side. And then I'll load the white. And regardless of your machine manufacturer, you should be able to use twin needles. The top of the needle, the twin needle, looks just like the top of a regular needle. So you're just going to take your regular needle out. Hang on just a second and I will show you. Okay, so here's the top of the twin needle. And here's the top of a regular needle. So you just put your twin needle in just like you would a regular needle. Okay, so now I've got my twin needles loaded and threaded. And now on the FOF machine, they have a really nice feature where you can go in and actually turn off and on the twin needle function. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to choose twin needle and to turn it on, and then I can actually choose the width of the needle that I have on my machine. I believe I had a 4, and I'm not sure this it's terribly necessary that it know the width of the needle that you're using, except maybe as a bit of a safety device, safety function. But now it's going to, on the screen, on my screen, you can see that I've got 2 rows of stitching, which would happen whether or not I had that function on, because I've got 2 spools of thread, 2 needles that are loaded, and so forth. Okay, the next step is to take the blade, and you notice the blade has 2 little notches, and your stitch plate has 2 holes, and you're going to take and line up those notches with the holes and pop that little blade into place. And then I'm going to put my foot on. Okay, and now I'm ready to go. My first row is going to go, I'll just go along here. And I just made my first pin tuck, and I've used that higher blade when with the 4mm twin needle on. I've got a pretty tall pin tuck there. So now I'm going to make the second pass. Let me cut off some of this mess, and I'm going to stitch on this side, and when I do, lower the foot. I make sure that I get the pin tuck in the next groove over. And now I've got 2 Pintucks, and again these are pretty high because I've used that 4mm needles just for demonstration purposes. And then if I want to keep going to this direction, I'll have both of those. You can see here, this Pintuck is riding in this groove, and this Pintuck is riding in this groove. Okay, now I've got 3 Pintucks, and what I might do is then go on the other side just to show you what the grooves do on the other side. Is, you know, I can just flip this over and then keep adding Pintucks to this side. Now I've got 3 Pintucks but 2 grooves in the foot, and I'll just load along the 2 to the right. And just keep going across. So now I've got, what, 4 perfectly spaced Pintucks. And just keep going across the fabric that the width that you want. And there you go, with perfect Pintucks.